There's this voice in my head nagging me. It's a little symbiote whispering in its alienness, Breath of the Wild is the true heir to Zelda 1. I know not where I stumbled upon this idea, but I unwittingly let it fester in my mind nonetheless, and it's taken over. It's an itch I can't scratch. To prevent being engulfed by its gooey, otherworldly sheen, I open 100 tabs. I lurk on forums, I read old interviews with the development team, and I try to maintain a firm grip on my sanity as I grapple with this idea that Breath of the Wild captures the essence of Zelda unlike any other game in the franchise since the original. As I scroll, I see an echo of the larger Zelda discourse. People can't agree. What is immediately clear is that they're having two different conversations. Interesting, engaging conversations, which start to scratch that itch. Push back on that alien voice, to the point where all my lurking has led me to an answer about the original Legend of Zelda, about Breath of the Wild, and about the heir apparent to the Zelda crown. To understand my answer, we must first understand the context of these two games and the nature of the two conversations surrounding them. In 1986, video games changed forever. An old man in a cave told us it was dangerous to go alone and let us loose in an action-adventure world never before seen. Famously inspired by creator Shigeru Miyamoto's Kyoto boyhood wanderings, The Legend of Zelda did three important things. First, it combined many of the elements of the role-playing action-adventure genre traditionally found in computer games, like the Black Onyx, Ultima, and the Tower of Juaga, taking what was normally done through command prompts and reorienting them into one-to-one actions, carried out by the player character, what game director Takashi Tezuka described as a real-time adventure game. Secondly, it rejected the then in vogue, quick-burst, high-score-focused arcade trend, proving that a console could have a game whose goal was simply to complete it. The Legend of Zelda was all that and more, puzzling and cryptic, not just about exploration, but about navigation and discovery. And what Miyamoto described as Nintendo's first game that forced the players to think about what they should do next. It plopped you into the middle of a world and let you figure it out. And thirdly, because it was brimming with mystery and secrets, it fueled playground speculation and communication. No longer were you competing against your friends for top scores, instead you were working together. In short, the original Legend of Zelda was, at the time, the ultimate adventure, proving to be the very treasure it promised, if the golden cartridge was any indication. The original laid the groundwork for a game formula that, following the idiosyncratic Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link, was first truly realized in A Link to the Past's 2D world, codified by Ocarina of Time, and persisted to varying degrees throughout almost all of the mainline releases through, and perhaps most dramatically implemented in, Skyward Sword. The crime levied against Skyward Sword, beyond its heavy and often janky emphasis on motion controls, was its extreme linearity. As great as many of the game's dungeons were, they were often overlooked by the overworld's less open, more dungeon-like design. Some considered it the turning point in a series that was once the greatest thing since sliced bread, now turned stale and moldy. But what's this? From on high, our savior! May the heavenly butter knife rend this stale bread in twain, and from its toasted ashes rise our sacred series once more. In 2017, video games changed forever. Again. Shortly after waking, we're let loose in a familiar world newly imagined. Breath of the Wild was here, and it was exactly what the series needed. The paraglider, stamina, climbing, cooking, and a world that was both bigger than had ever been seen in a Zelda game and interactable in a way that was realistic and engaging. Multiplicative gameplay, as director Hidemaru Fujibayashi described it. Physics and chemical-based, open, and most importantly, free. Not open world, no, open air. Breath of the Wild, like Zelda 1, took the popular gaming template of its time, the modern open world, and implemented it in an arguably revolutionary way. Breathe it in. Your franchise has been rejuvenated. Now, somewhere along the line, the original Legend of Zelda and Breath of the Wild became intertwined in a strange way. This idea blossomed that everything Zelda was ever meant to be was finally, fully realized in Breath of the Wild. If the limitations of the NES were non-existent and the developers could realize their full vision in 1986, Breath of the Wild would be the game they created. Plastered on headlines of articles and forums, and what I perceived as bright, flashing letters was the notion that Breath of the Wild was the most similar to the original, its spiritual successor, a return to the series' roots. Having recently played through and expounded upon the merits of the original game, I was confused by this notion and so started my obsession with unraveling it. Much of this notion stems from Nintendo themselves and how they marketed Breath of the Wild, with a litany of direct comparisons. When the original was released, Nintendo relied on this evocative image to capture a feeling which the NES lacked the computational power to produce. Describing this, Miyamoto said, "In the old Zelda, there was an image, an illustration that we started with, and you kind of had to put that in your imagination." Nintendo then cleverly replicated the image at Breath of the Wild's release, though I don't know why, as Miyamoto continues. Now you don't need that. This vast world surpasses the illustration, and you can walk and do things in this world that's come to life. During development, quotes from the development team also leaned into this comparison. Eiji Aonuma heralded Breath of the Wild as getting back to basics, so that players could enjoy the real essence of the franchise. Shigeru Miyamoto added, "We really want to go back to the original spirit of Zelda, which is freedom." We'll get back to these quotes and more later. But perhaps the biggest culprit came from this 2017 Game Developers Conference presentation. Here, while Fujibayashi explained multiplicative gameplay, the design philosophy behind Breath of the Wild, he says, "I thought that the quickest way to bring this to life and to present this to the rest of the team would be to create this in 2D. Later, technical director Takahiro Doda adds, "When we started out, we had no guarantee that this sort of approach would work. So I used 2D graphics to quickly create a prototype as a proof of concept. And that's all this is. It is a test to see if the multiplicative gameplay logic works. This prototype is simply using the crudest Zelda game as a template for a more sophisticated gameplay logic." But Fujibayashi knew how this would be received.
This is very nostalgic.
Here's where we can put an end to one of these conversations I mentioned earlier. In my humble lurkings, it was clear people couldn't agree on whether Breath of the Wild was trying to recreate Zelda 1 from a gameplay perspective or from a philosophical one, and the GDC presentation didn't help matters. But anyone who has played both knows that, as games, they are wildly different. And we can argue about Breath of the Wild's extreme focus on its overworld and compare that to the original's balance of overworld and dungeons. You can watch my recent videos on it, whatever. But in a 2016 interview, Miyamoto makes it clear. The relationship between Breath of the Wild and The Legend of Zelda first comes from the reactions of people who have been able to test the game. We are not trying to recreate the first Zelda. Okay? The other half of that conversation is a much more interesting one we'll focus on from this point forward. Let me refer you back to this illustration. It's clear Nintendo didn't want to recreate Zelda 1 as a game. They wanted to recapture that feeling of adventure oozing from this image. They wanted to recapture not the gameplay or design of Zelda 1, but the experience. And to do this, they had to infuse Breath of the Wild with what Aonuma called the real essence of the franchise. Oh man, how does one define a Zelda game? I've tried, it's hard. Some say if it's made by the Zelda team and has the Zelda name on it, then it's a Zelda game. The dev team has said this as a joke, but it's often used as a lazy smokescreen to disengage with the actual question. Here's Eiji Aonuma's thoughts. The idea of what defines the essence of Zelda becomes the most important thing. That is really the only absolutely fundamental criterion which we can then use to build on. But as you said, that isn't something which is clearly defined. Personally, I can't put into words what the essence of Zelda is, and while I know that I should be able to, I still couldn't give you a clear definition. Maybe Miyamoto has something more clear to offer. Zelda has an epic story and all, but the truth is, to me, it's all about hiking. That last one is a bit cheeky, but I'm willing to give Aonuma's quote the benefit of the doubt. It isn't that he doesn't know what the essence of Zelda is, he describes it instead as more of a gut feeling. But that also makes it difficult to discern what he called the real essence of Zelda when describing Breath of the Wild. What makes the real essence quote even stranger is that Aonuma himself admits he doesn't always see eye to eye with Miyamoto about what this real essence is. The late great president of Nintendo, Satoru Iwata, perhaps summed it up best. As far as my opinion is concerned, I have a strong feeling that there are as many definitions of Zelda as there are people. But these definitions are not completely different from each other. Rather, they all overlap to some extent with one another. Taking it one step further, I think the fact that there isn't a perfect definition that can be expressed in words is the reason that Zelda games offer such a rich and rewarding experience. For what it's worth, Iwata also believes that The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time firmly established the essence of Zelda, a sentiment Aonuma agreed with. So that's not particularly helpful, but here's an interesting quote by another of the developers. Because the game lets the player experiment with so many choices, it doesn't feel like you are being forced to do things. This gives the player the sense that they are making progress in a game by virtue of their own experience and working things out on their own. For me, the essence of a Zelda game is that feeling the player gets when they are able to solve puzzles in their own way. This is actually a quote about Twilight Princess, which sounds very similar to the philosophy of Breath of the Wild, two games no one would ever say are similar. Another quote that sounds like it references Breath of the Wild is actually a quote from Miyamoto about Wind Waker. Zelda is a game that values reality over realism. He said something similar about A Link to the Past, that the game's logic needs to make sense. Even his opinion of Skyward Sword is surprising. It's completely faithful to the spirit of Zelda. I mean, this game sticks to that clear path that a Zelda game must stick to. I bring up all of these quotes to highlight how consistent Nintendo has been with their view on the development of Zelda games. I often hear that the essence of Zelda is, as Miyamoto said earlier, freedom or exploration, but these words are invoked so nebulously that it's hard to nail down what they mean. I've said my piece on the constraints of the original Zelda and how its exploration differed from overworld to dungeon. It's also true that the broad definitions of freedom or exploration also serve as the foundation for many other games that don't resemble Zelda, a game like Outer Wilds, for example. However, whenever the conversation turns to Breath of the Wild as a return to the roots of the series, that conversation seems to sideline all the other games that came between them. Breath of the Wild is because all of these past games were. There is a distinct through line that connects all of these games and their development. To me, it's obvious that the Zelda team has always returned to the amorphous essence of the series as the basis for each game. But that raises quite a question. Our mission in developing this new Zelda game, Aonuma said, is quite plainly to rethink the conventions of Zelda. A mission similarly invoked in the development of A Link Between Worlds, I might add. He continues, I'm referring to the expectation that the player is supposed to complete dungeons in a certain order. We want to set aside these conventions, get back to basics, and create a newborn Zelda so that the players can best enjoy the real essence of the franchise. Aonuma is speaking directly to the linearity of the series, one particular aspect of the overall essence, and a trait that the series has implemented to various degrees across its lifetime. Check out Cinnamon Noir's video on this if you're interested in a bit more detail, I'll link that below. But in this quote, I spot a certain tenuous balance between rethinking conventions and returning to basics, one that seems strikingly contradictory. To me, Breath of the Wild's development is less a reverential nod to the original and more of a reaction both to the reception of Skyward Sword, the series' trajectory as a whole, and the current state of popular gaming. In a decision with a similar overcorrective flair as Twilight Princess's graphical style following the backlash to Wind Waker, Skyward Sword's extreme linearity was replaced with the singular openness of Breath of the Wild's overworld. In Fujibayashi's words, an entire landscape that lays before the user opens up asking them, so which path are you going to take? Paired with climbing and paragliding, Fujibayashi felt this was the crucial ingredient that would expand the sense of freedom in the new Zelda. He continued, doesn't this just sound like the original Zelda? A game where the user can think and decide on their own where they want to go and what they want to do and experience excitement and adventure? I thought to myself, maybe what I need to do to create such a game is to go back to the essence. An essence that is not so simply reduced as we've discussed. Let's also be clear. While it's true Zelda 1 was relatively open with relative freedom to explore, there was a distinct path in that game, and its freedom was in your ability to choose how you wanted to interact with that path. But whatever you decided ultimately led you along that path. Breath of the Wild's freedom is different, and this gets to the point I mentioned earlier about these terms being nebulous. Breath of the Wild's freedom allows you to ignore the path, or to create an irrelevant one of your own design. While that is freedom, it is not spiritually aligned with the original. Breath of the Wild, like Zelda 2 before it, though unknown to that game at the time, was unlike anything that had been seen in the Zelda franchise. Even if it pulled from the evocative illustration of the original, or expounded on the sense of scale and immersion of Ocarina of Time, or rallied against Skyward Sword's everything's a dungeon-ness, it still became its own thing, skyrocketing the popularity of the series in the process. But I also don't think it went far enough. Curiously, it retains some of the hand-holdy elements the previous games were often lambasted for, but now you had the option to ignore them. Miyamoto describes Nintendo's intentions. As the series progressed, there were more added features. As we started doing that, we realized that the game was becoming more and more sequential. In past Zelda titles, there was a tendency for NPCs to explain everything about the world. We went back to the origins of Zelda where, as you start the game, you don't know who you are, what you are supposed to do. In this new game, as you interact with nature and the world around you, you learn who you are. Which is all well and good to say, but at the beginning of the game, you talk to an NPC who explains the world to you and points you to objectives. Not to mention the game places actual objective markers on your map, which seems like the absolute antithesis to the spirit of the original game. I first played Breath of the Wild in 2017, and the original Legend of Zelda in 2024. I don't have the experience of recapturing the original's essence because I played them out of order. But I also never felt the sense of awe from Breath of the Wild as many of its biggest proponents did. If your experience successfully recaptured that feeling from the original, I'm genuinely interested in hearing it because I don't and can't ever share it. But it's useless to argue experiences. Ultimately, my answer to is Breath of the Wild the true heir to the original Zelda is no, neither functionally nor spiritually. All of the games in the series referred back to that elusive essence of Zelda to map out their development. But Breath of the Wild, like many of the other games in the franchise, is singular. It is the result of the developers choosing which of the series' many essential characteristics to enhance or downplay. Twilight Princess was one extreme, heavy dungeon and story focus, no choice. Breath of the Wild was the other extreme, structurally open with almost complete choice. Many games fall in between, but few come close to capturing the interplay between overworld and dungeons, choice and restriction, like the original. Which, if you look at the consensus of fans who are already growing weary of the Wild era, this sort of balance, what was done surprisingly well in the original, is what they're asking for. And that answer is enough to jettison that little whispering symbiote back into the galaxy from whence it came, until Nintendo appoints the next heir. Also, when discussing how to keep raising your score in Link's crossbow training, Iwata said, "That aspect of the game sounds like quintessential Zelda."